Hello and welcome to Reiki Women Podcasts. It's Bronwen Logan here from Reiki with Bronwen, and my two colleagues are Michaela Daystar from Heartscapes Reiki and Carrie Varella from the Reiki Healing Society. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
And today we're going to talk about something that has a lot of different angles to reach it. It's the word right. Now, we have a certain perspective of what right might mean in our possibly Western culture, in at least in our three Western culture, and then the system of Reiki comes from Japan, so it has a very strong Buddhist influence. So the term right has some different meanings in that, and we can look at the system of Reiki, and we can look at how we practice. We can look at the symbols and mantras. We can look at treatments. We can look at all different aspects, self-practice, and see what it means to have a right relationship to those things. So I'm going to actually open this up and throw it to Michaela. Michaela, what do you think it means to have a right relationship to the system of Reiki?
Yeah, it's I love that you started off talking about the way that we can look at this from so many different angles, right? Including our own personal definition of what it means to be have a right relationship with something, including with our practice with the system of Reiki and with the phenomenon of Reiki itself, making that distinction. So I think the place that I wanted to start was kind of contextualizing one of those perspectives, which is the one that's most directly related to the system of Reiki itself, which is those Buddhist origins. And kind of coming at that, interpreting it through, my viewpoint as a Western person and having studied Buddhism in the context of the system of Reiki. And, looking at it from the kind of simplest perspective, when we talk about having right relationship in the context of Buddhism, it's really referring to that concept of interdependence or interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it, being aware of and actively in response to the knowledge that we are interconnected beings, that we have a certain perspective that is our own. We have our way that we walk through the world that is our own experience, but that our being is inherently much bigger than that and is connected with each other, with the many aspects of inside of ourselves, with the wider web of life, with the natural world, truly with all things, if we really follow that thought process out to its edges. And so if we think about right relationship in that context, we're talking about what is the way to be in relationship with everything in a way that, in my words, serves life and serves that sense of connection. And if we're looking at how to respond to something or how to approach something in our life, in our day-to-day life, what approach or what decision or what interaction is going to serve connection, is going to serve life versus serving disconnection, serving duality, a distancing from each other. And that can get complex because, there's a lot of complexity to our relationships. And sometimes, serving what we need most to be in good relationship with ourselves is to set a boundary with a person, for example, is to maybe not be in direct relationship with that person. To move away from that person or that situation or that decision or what have you. But there's still a way to do that in a way that serves life and that serves interconnection, that serves interbeing, ways to bring compassion to that boundary setting, to that stepping away, to that moving away. And to me, those are the subtleties that come into play when we want to be in right relationship with ourselves, each other, the wider web of life. And of course, the system of Reiki points us to this and gives us some instruction and some guidance in doing that. And we can see that in a lot of different places, but very specifically in the fourth precept, when we look at it from the perspective of being true to your way and your being. So you have this, this path that we have in our life, and this precept distinguishes those two aspects of ourself that I just talked about, our way, our individual life, the decisions we make, the experiences we have, what we need to, do to move our individual life forward. And then we have our being, which is that wider context of interdependence and interbeing, that my one life is really an expression of this larger life. And one of the most it's a question and an exploration. As I've been teaching this material over the years, I've come to really appreciate that this particular precept, and really when we think about how to take this precept on in our life, is the one that gives us the most opportunity to get really subtle and complex in how we apply it to our daily life. Because how do you make a decision, or how do you approach a challenging or conflict filled relationship in a way that's true to both your way and your being? And then to kind of root it back into the question that we started with, how to be in right relationship with Reiki, with the system of Reiki, with Reiki, the phenomenon in the world, in a way that honors both our way and our being. And so that circles us back to our original question with that context. And Carrie, I know you came to this conversation with a possibly related, but also a different perspective on how we might think about this question of right relationship. So I'd love to have you throw that context into the cauldron for us.
Well, right. Well, I so appreciate that Buddhist perspective and point of view, and just your own interpretation of it as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not actually super familiar with this, so I don't want to speak, to say something that's incorrect. But this whole notion of right relationship is embedded within a lot of Indigenous cultures, and there might be nuances to how it's expressed and talked about, and maybe different methods of being in right relationship. But I think some of the common themes are being humble with yourself, humble about with life. Right relationship is about your connection to the earth, to your relationships, and your ancestors as well, and being in right relationship with the world around you. And some practices that help us be in right relationship are, again, humility, forgiveness, perhaps doing rituals oriented around our ancestors. And I read this definition, which I just thought was so beautiful, is that, to be in right relationship and to be in relationship with somebody else is to be responsible for that other person as well. So being responsible not only to ourselves, but also to them, and to take care of each other, to be kind and take care of each other. And yeah, and so it's just such a nourishing thought, I guess. I mean, it's just such an interesting question, and particularly for myself, who, I definitely struggled in relationships in different times and aspects of my life. First of all, to like what Michaela was talking about, and I know she just jumped off because she's been having some connection issues, but um, struggles to create those strong boundaries, and to not bend over backwards for people, and to recognize when my boundaries have been crossed, and recognize when I need to create a better relationship with myself so I can feel more comfortable having stronger boundaries. That can be one thing. So I think right relationship, it really starts with ourself. And when we think about right relationship with Reiki, I think that that's such an interesting perspective, because, if we understand Reiki from a more esoteric point of view, Reiki is pointing us in the direction of our true self, our soul, our spirit, of like who we really are beyond this physical body, more in this energetic and spiritual place. And so, even though, kind of depends on your context within how you're defining Reiki, or working with the system of Reiki. Reiki can also be the universe as well. So it's speaking to both an inner and outer relationship, and how, our inner world is a reflection also of our outer world. So I think when we're talking about finding right relationship, it really does start with ourself, even though it might seem like an external thing. Like if we don't have the relationships that we're desiring, if there is challenge or conflict in our relationships, to look inside of ourselves and really start with ourself. And then from this kind of strengthening the container of ourself, we begin to explore how we're in right relationship with others around us. And yeah, so I just love that notion of feeling responsible for others, and then maybe there's some something there to explore, but just to really recognize that, in intimate relationships and friendships and family, um, you know, I think in my family, we have to know that we belong together, and we have to have that same sacred trust that we all belong together and that we're all striving to take care of each other, and that, we all play a role to help each other. And there's times in it when it's important to be able to step back and take care of ourselves as well. So but those are kind of some of my thoughts that came up around the topic. Bronwen, what do you think?
Yeah, well, welcome back, Michaela. Yeah, I thought there's some really lovely ideas there. I sort of wasn't going down the route that you two went, but I totally get it. And I, just because I could see the interbeing idea that Michaela had, which I love the idea, the Thich Nhat Hanh's interbeing, but and how, yeah, in a way you're sort of fleshing that out, Carrie, I guess, talking about how we are inside outside together, and yeah, that's really beautiful. I was sort of looking at it from, well, I was thinking of, I guess I was thinking of it more from a Buddhist perspective just because of the system of Reiki. But, like in the West, we think of things like right being the opposite of wrong, so right and wrong. And in Buddhism, I mean, no, the word right does not mean that type of right. It's a different type of right. So there's a couple of ways I could describe it. But first, I guess if I were to look at what it means from a Buddhist perspective, it comes from a Sanskrit background. And right, actually, it has a number. It has a number of meanings in Sanskrit, but one of them, which I love, is to unite, which actually relates to exactly what you two were talking about. And also it relates to something that we do within the system of Reiki, which is when we place our hands in gasso. The word gasso means to unite. So we're bringing together, and, we're physically doing that in our practices. So, we might be doing it as a way of setting intention, feeling gratitude, or just sitting in that space of unitedness. And that is right, which is sort of interesting. I had a Reiki treatment on the weekend, and I was trying to describe to this guy whose girlfriend booked him in for a Reiki treatment. He didn't know he was coming for a Reiki treatment. Generally my worst type of client, but he was actually lovely and it was all good. But I was a bit like, because you just don't know, do you? And anyway, he was lovely, but he didn't have any idea what on earth it was. And I think every time I explain what a Reiki treatment is to a client, it's different because it depends on who you're describing it to. But I guess one way that I describe it is that our body and our mind and our heart, that these aspects of ourselves, that they let go of all the things that they're holding on to, and they try to find their place back into some sort of balance with each other. And that is sort of like a neutral space. And I don't normally use the word neutral, but the word neutral came up and I was like, it's like a neutral space. And that to me is, when people talk about things like emptiness, for example, and when we hear the word emptiness, especially in our Western culture, it just sounds lonely and horrible and not really a place I'd like to be. But that's actually, it's this space of not holding on to things. It's a space of of letting go and release. And that is a space where, when we move into healing, like with a Reiki treatment, for example, when we, or whatever we're doing to move into that healing space, we're moving our bodies. If we can let go, our bodies, our body, mind, heart, that they're all moving into that space of alignment with one another, and nothing is holding them back. So that to me is like the right space. That is this space it is emptiness, if you want to take it from a Buddhist perspective. It is a space that is just this boundless, uh, if there was something in that space, then it would be obstructing or making something move in a different way. And those are the things that we hold on to. And that's why we have the Reiki precepts, because they tell us, to let go of anger. That would be something that would be in that space, or worry. And to be true to our way, like you both said, really, that is just that letting it happen, letting ourselves move into that, the freedom of that space. So those were the things that I was thinking about. There was more. Oh, I know what I was thinking. No, I think that was actually sort of it. So I don't know if anyone's got anything to add or to that, or some other thoughts.
Yeah, I love, again, the range of ways that we can take what seems like a simple question, right? What does it mean to be in right relationship with Reiki or with anything else? And there are these different ways, but I love the threads that are between them, right? So, Bronwen, you talked about Gasso and that meaning of unity, or with the bringing together of opposites, and that's again pointing us back to that state of interbeing, and then bringing in Indigenous perspectives that has us really cast our mind to the natural world, and to really, put to the front of our mind, what is our relationship with that world? What are our responsibilities, therefore, towards the natural world and towards ourselves as a part of that natural world? And I always want to, remind myself and remind all of us that all of us come from Indigenous peoples who understood that. If we go far enough back on our lineage and our heritage, no matter where we can track our ancestry, we'll, eventually find people who lived in, as well as they could, right relationship with the natural world, and who really were very conscious and intentional about tending that relationship. And so, if we look at it through the Reiki lens, we would be talking about Indigenous Shinto perspectives. If we're talking about it through the lens of my, personal ancestry, I would be looking to Celtic roots. But no matter, where we are from in the world, we're from people who understand this, which means that we have it in ourselves inherently to understand this. And of course, then we also have teachings that bring that to the forefront. And so, one of the many things that's amazing and wonderful about that fact is that nature is such a clear and consistent and thorough teacher about things like this, right? About right relationship, about unity, about interbeing. We can see those things occurring in the most mundane corners of the natural world all the time if we pay attention. And that's really good news, because these concepts can feel sometimes a little bit confusing, a little bit esoteric, a little bit like, well, maybe I understand that conceptually, but again, what does that have to do with my life? And how do I integrate this idea of being in right relationship into my day-to-day decisions and experiences? And, starting with what does it look like to be in right relationship with nature, and then observing the way that nature functions, is a really concrete, but also really poetic way of going about that inquiry. And of course, the system of Reiki has grown out of that kind of understanding. And no matter how esoteric the teachings might get, it is all rooted in what is observable in the natural world. And that includes inside of our own self, our own bodies, our psyche, our imagination, our feelings. It's really all there for us to explore and to find if we take the time and focus our attention. And so that always just feels like good news to me, that we have this incredible teacher that is so thorough and elegant and complex, to be sure, but in other ways very simple in terms of how we can see what right relationship looks like. And, I often say that we need to look no further than, compost pile to see the ways in which the many elements of life cooperate and come into unity with each other to generate more life. And, I often, and many people often use the metaphor of composting, bioremediating, the processing of, dead things back into living energy as a really powerful, not only direct example in the living world, but also metaphor for how we might approach our lives, right? So being in right relationship with ourselves, for example, can include recognizing when it's time to let something go, when it's time to let something, pass and decompose, but then also tending the new life that's coming forward. We could probably each pick any number of examples of things in our life that have had those kinds of qualities. And perhaps times in our life when it's been very challenging to let go of those things that are passing away in our life. That can include relationships, it can include jobs, it can include beliefs and thoughts, that it's like, wow, I've outgrown that thought process, but I'm still holding on to it. So, again, we have these complex topics that we really are benefited to bring into our day-to-day life, and the system of Reiki helps us to do that. And then we have this beautiful, thorough, elegant teacher in the natural world that can help us do that. And if that feels unfamiliar to anyone looking to the natural world in this way, it helps to remember that, again, we all come from people who did this. We all come from people who understood what right relationship with the world looks like, and extended that, absolutely, included in that right relationship in communities, in families, in societies, and right relationship with spiritual practice, right? So right relationship with the system of Reiki, for example. And then the other place that my mind went as I was listening to the two of you and thinking about this is, on a more granular level, what does it look like for me personally, for you, for any of us to be in right relationship with Reiki itself in that intimate place? And, here we can, of course, start with the things that are obvious, right? Staying committed to our practice. Just for today, I am diligent in being true to my way and my being as best I can in any given moment, being compassionate, being rooted in gratitude, letting go of anger and fear. So, that's a question to really come back to, because if we're not in right relationship with our practice, meaning we are engaging the practice, we're allowing the practice to work on us, we're making, we're paying attention to how being in the practice impacts us. We have a personal part of that practice. We don't only focus our practice on doing Tanahira or, palm healing treatments on other people, which is definitely how I approached my practice for the first couple of years. I've talked about that before. The point of this practice is to heal other people. Nope. The point of this practice is to be in good, right relationship with ourselves, and then to allow that right relationship to expand outward. So, these are the things that we can, be in, take honest self-assessments and inventories around, right? Am I in right relationship with my practice with Reiki, and therefore with the phenomenon of Reiki, which of course is simply what we are, right? In a certain sense, saying, am I in right relationship with Reiki, with spiritual energy, with the phenomenon of Reiki in the world? It's the same question as saying, am I in right relationship with myself? Am I in right relationship with you? Am I in right relationship with the living creatures that are in my environment? It's all the same question. And that's, again, on the one hand, maybe a little bit complex, but on the other hand, it's good news, because we can actually approach the question from any of those directions, right? We can get in right relationship as a starting point in any of those realms, right? To start with, like what feels available to me Maybe I'm really, really struggling in a relationship, and it's really hard to think of how I can bring compassion to that relationship. And it's really hard, therefore, to be in right relationship with that relationship. Maybe I'm really struggling to be in good, right relationship with myself. There's times when I feel really badly about myself, and I say nasty things to myself, and I'm not compassionate, and I'm not grateful, and I'm angry, and I'm afraid about myself, right? There's those times. In those times, can I be in good, right relationship with my garden? Can I be in good, right relationship with my cat? Right? Usually the answer is yeah, probably I could. If I could get my head out of like feeling sorry for myself, I can probably get in good, right relationship
Yeah.
with my cat and my garden. And then that becomes a point of inspiration and a point of expansion that often kind of helps me circle back around and get back in good, right relationship with myself and with the relationships that might be struggling in my life. So yeah, I think really to sum up all of what I just said, again, it comes back to interbeing and to interconnection, right? And that's good news because again, we can pull any thread that's available to us, and it touches the whole web.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love all of that. I mean, I think it's just such a deep concept, and yet, it's surprisingly simple too. I mean, we can look at it more deductively in any aspect of our life, like you said, Michaela, and you get to see maybe a deeper level of and complexity that's there. So, I'm just thinking, my mind's going towards right relationship with the, business of Reiki. How do you hold the challenging, arduous process of building a Reiki practice, and kind of riding the waves of working with other people, holding their challenges and suffering, but not taking it on for yourself. Of creating those strong boundaries, finding clients, making enough money, all of that. It can kind of tie around our own identity and who we feel like we are. And so I heard it recently, and it's just been such a good reminder, is that, I am not my business. Like, I am not like, what's going on in that pocket of my life is actually not all that I am, and so to be able to make that separation, and in order to do that is to help find more right relationship. Who I am is not an expression of what I do or who I serve or who I help. Who I am is something much more intrinsic than that. Yet those imbalances in our life can really show up when we choose to, or we look at things more deductively. Like, so, you think about money, as is a form of relationship. It's a currency of relationship, and it shows us how we are in relationship with the external world. And when we don't have a lot of money, maybe there is something to explore around being more open to receiving our needs, to be in touch with our needs, getting our needs met in a healthy way. um, Likewise in relationship, when conflict is kind of constantly rearing its head, I know for myself, sometimes that relates to just this mirrored aspect of our relationship, that we see something in someone else that we can't accept in ourselves, and so there's these conflicts that arise. And so when we see other people, and the people that we really want to be in relationship with, is to remember that we're seeing ourselves like a different reflection of who we are. um and this whole task of healing relationships, from different lenses and points of view, like from Vedic astrology lens, which I've been studying more and more of lately. It is like one of the more foundational buckets, let's say, where our healing patterns really arrive. Like, so, we can have healing patterns related to our physical health, and that also can point us back in this direction of right relationship. So how is our physical health, how is our relationship with our body reflecting to us, right relationship with the world, and ourself as well. But money, finances, that's a whole nother bucket of relationship, or of life lessons. And yeah, also relationship with ourself and the world. And so it's yeah, well, something I just love and appreciate so much about psychology is that it's so intangible, these aspects of relationship, but they're yet like inside there's so many patterns that are there. And when you learn to read the patterns, you get to understand yourself a little bit deeper. And I just love the system of Reiki. I love the practice of Reiki because it really gets to the heart of being in right relationship, and knowing that it starts with ourselves. But as we open ourselves up to the world, to the universe, we get to see how we're part interwoven into a whole, and we're all playing a part, in that process of helping other people heal. We really do it starts with ourselves, but that work ripples on out to the world. So yeah, anyways, there's just so much beauty, I think, to really sit with. And I'm also really reflecting, how in a Western culture, Bronwen, you mentioned this, is, this kind of more dual aspect of like, well, right means wrong, or right is the opposite of wrong. And I think from this point of view, sorry, from this point of view, it's more like, there's balance or imbalance. Like what you were talking about, that Bronwyn, is like when we enter that void or this emptiness, it gives us an opportunity to find balance and harmony and equality in our mind, body, and heart, and not putting one as more important than the other. That's something sometimes I think I struggle with, is that it's all important. It's like we can't neglect our mind and just focus fully on our heart space, for example. Like they are connected to each other, and that when we enter that balance state, we can also really feel it. And some of what you were saying too, Michaela, is just, we can know when we're out of right relationship when it is imbalanced, and when we don't feel good thoughts about ourselves, when we, walk through the world judging ourselves or limiting ourselves, or comparing ourselves to others, sets up these hierarchies. But I think when I'm in right relationship, like I think of just feeling good and carefree and relaxed inside of my own self. I feel a stronger sense of self-esteem. I feel confident in my place in the world. And so that and that shows up, and it can show up for me in so many different ways, in different aspects of how I relate to myself, to my family, to others. And so yeah, I mean, I guess back to what you were saying, Bronwyn, is that the opposite of right, I think in this case, is imbalance. Like how do we know we're found in balance? And coming back to the topic, the question is, how to be in right relationship with Reiki is also to know, like, when do I feel imbalanced with my spiritual practice? When do I feel imbalanced with it? And part of that journey of knowing ourselves is like knowing what that feels like when we don't feel like we're in right relationship, or we're not in integrity with our practice. We're not doing our practice in a way that supports us, no matter how you relate to Reiki. So,
Yeah.
Bronwyn.
Yeah, a lot of what you were just saying there just made me think about one thing that we haven't spoken about within the system of Reiki, and that is distance healing. And in fact, what you were describing was distance healing. So this thing about starting with yourself, feeling comfortable in yourself, opening yourself up, connecting with the world, sharing that balanced space. And that is what we do when we practice distance healing. And I think that often people think when we work with symbol 3 and its mantra, that is all about distance healing. And you could say that if you like, but in reality, it is about having a right relationship with yourself and the world around you. And we could, I think we can also call that interbeing, obviously, right? So I mean, these things, they're all related. In fact, the term for that particular symbol and its mantra is interconnectedness. So when we're looking at the word, the mantra, which is Japanese kanji, hon sha zei shonen, sho is right. And if we look at the Buddhist the noble eightfold path, yes, that's all right speech, right thoughts, right acts, right living. These are all the things that you've just mentioned. It's all the, when we see it in a Buddhist thing, it becomes very, I think, look, I'm just talking from a person who's not a Buddhist, but, those things can seem a little distant and a little outside my realm of understanding. But in reality, they're just what we're trying to do and how we're trying to live in a healthy, happy, balanced life. And so we can see that the system of Reiki deals directly with this idea of right, even, within the practices such as the symbols and mantras. And that's, telling us that Honsha Shonen is, there's lots of different translations for that. And some of them are not literal. Like you could have like, I am right mind. And really what's that saying? That's saying that, I'm having a right relationship with myself. And when you were talking before, Carrie, I was thinking how difficult it is sometimes to have that right relationship with yourself and how to feel comfortable in ourselves before we even move out into like distance healing, right? Or whatever, into the concepts of interbeing. Just that whole thing of feeling okay about ourselves. I mean, how many people can truly say about themselves that they feel right about themselves? I don't, I mean, there are aspects of me that, I think it probably would find hard to love or like or whatever. And they're the things that obviously that I would also like to work with and shift and change. But to find that those pure moments of right relationship with the self is enlightenment. It's perfection. And so yeah, you're right. I think both of you, that thing of that we need to begin with ourselves and work with ourselves and find where that takes us. And we're lucky that we have these tools within the system of Reiki that we can work with, and they can inspire us and they can give us something to work with.
Yeah. I love that you brought Honsha Shonen into this and, again, kind of fleshing out what is really meant when we talk about distance healing in the system of Reiki and how it's this inside out expansion of that right relationship. And that it really does require some level of fluency with right relationship with ourselves. Not that we have to be perfect, as you just said, Bronwen, as I've said, it is hard, and it's not something that it's easy to be consistent with all the time. And the good news is we don't have to be, but we do have to be in the practice of it. We do have to be in the inquiry of it, and having, working with this system gives us more and more of those moments that you're speaking of when we really sink into a right relationship with ourselves. And then it's from that we can, express that outward in distance healing. And it's maybe a great topic to circle back to, because again, it's not about perfection. It's not like, well, until you're in perfect harmony, harmonized, balanced, interbeing, fully compassionate, and all the things for yourself at all times, 100%, you're enlightened, then you can't express any healing to anybody else, right? Like that's an extreme view that's inaccurate, right? And is not what we're saying. But, can we truly share a space of healing that is emanating from us that somebody else can, be inside of and can, pick up in their own system and therefore activate their own healing, which is, kind of how I think about what a Reiki session is, in person or distant, if we're not in any kind of inquiry around right relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And again, speaking from experience, my first couple of years with Reiki was almost entirely externally focused. Right. In fact, it was a spiritual bypassing of like, I can't deal with how much I hate myself in certain ways. And so let me love everybody else real, real good. Let me heal everybody else, make everybody else feel real, real good so that I don't have to deal with that, you know? And I was very limited in what I could share, but what I was able to share, just even being in the question of it, was enough to put me on the path, thank goodness, right? And eventually come back around to, oh, this is an inside out job. Like it actually the seed has to be planted and germinated and nourished and growing to some capacity in here before I can share it outward. And when teaching Honshase Shonen and the various ways we can translate that, and my original nature is a right thought or a correct thought being, often the starting point that I use. It's just so lovely the way that you're tying that in, Bronwen, to this question of right relationship. My original nature is to be in right relationship with myself. And therefore, because we are interconnected, because of interbeing, with all of life, right? It's this beautiful paradoxical, infinity symbol of like, when I'm really in good right relationship with myself, it really is, radiating out into that web of life. And again, one of those things that can feel very esoteric and very confusing when we first encounter a phrase like my original nature is a right thought. Like, what in the world does that mean, right? But when we ground that in these concepts that we've been discussing, and again, remember that nature is our best teacher because it's so concrete and it's so evident the way that these things operate, we can make it very accessible. It can be very operational in our life, which is fun, to be able to take these esoteric concepts that we have to maybe do a little work to even kind of figure out, and then go, oh, this is actually going to make my job better. This is going to make my relationship with my surly teenager better. This is going to make those periods of depression in the wintertime that I experience better because I have this relationship with this concept. It's moved from being a concept to being an active, thing in my life. So I love it. So juicy.
Any last words, Carrie?
Yeah, I think it's such a good topic. So much healing, in this conversation. And just this whole notion of right relationship. But I think about the right relationship with healing is maybe where I want to land, is just for when I first started with Reiki, I thought, healing was about like cutting off all these things that I didn't like about myself, getting rid of that baggage, right? And then just ascending and being a better person. So somehow bigger, brighter, more intelligent, more this, more that, more, all of the things that I felt like I lacked. And I really love this whole definition, this notion of healing is wholeness. And it's really shifted my own relationship with healing, and to recognize that I actually can't do that to myself. I can't cut off these parts of myself that I don't like, that, I heal in wholeness. And so that when I am, working with my relationship with myself, or how that it's expressed externally as well, um, is that I have to, speak with that wounded part of myself. I have to work with that part of myself that I don't like. And I have to learn how to love myself. And, if the practice of Reiki brings us closer to our true self, closer to who we are, a really easy barrier to run up against is that lack of respect for ourselves, that lack of care for ourselves, that self-depreciating attitude towards ourselves, and I've felt that and confronted it in so many different times in my life, and really have come back to finding my way back to self-love is starting, to feel the fruit of like loving and caring for myself unconditionally. And I think when we learn how to do that, like, we can do that in any relationship. We learn
Yeah.
how to take care of ourselves unconditionally, um, with love and care for ourselves. It just makes every aspect of our life better. And it doesn't have to be a selfish thing, doesn't have to be a narcissistic thing. It's actually about, starting there and then being able to see others, seeing them, and not asking for perfection from the people we love. We're asking more for, compatibility and kindness and cooperation and care for each other, and that maybe that shared responsibility as well. Um,
Mm.
but I love, and I'm so glad that we landed on the Han sensation end, because, well, of course, that thread of show being right. But I think it also really speaks to the power of the practice of Reiki, is that, when people have profound experiences, is that they're getting into that part of their being that just has this brilliant wisdom, this enlightened wisdom, to shed light on anything that's going on in our life. And when we feel that, it kind of shakes us, and as a practitioner, of course, every time I offer a Reiki session, I want to support people getting into that space. But what I'm also realizing is, as a healer, is that I can't do that for anybody else. I just have to hold the space, and they have to step into that power themselves. And then that way, I'm not taking responsibility for anybody else's healing or for anybody's else experience. I just do what, I'm there to do, to provide this service to others, and support them to, get what they want out of it, get they came here for. So
Beautiful. Yeah, that all touches my heart. And, you know, I guess as we finish off, it's good to think about loving ourselves, what that means, what it means to then interbe with the world. And we certainly want to share that love. We don't want to share the other bits that we're working on. So what we want to do is we want to continue to work on ourselves and really find that love in ourselves. And it's really makes it so much more easier then as well to be with others and help make this world a better place. So thank you for sharing with us today, being here with us, and you guys being here together. Don't forget to follow us and like us and do all those sorts of nice things. We always appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you at the next episode. If there's anything you'd like to talk about, maybe there's some ways that you work with to bring about that sense of self-love. I'd love to hear what you do and how you do it. Also, if there's any thoughts that you have for things that you'd like us to talk about, then please put that in too, because we're always, looking for something to talk about. So it'd be nice to hear from you about that too. Lots of love to everybody, and to you, Carrie, and to you, Michaela, and we'll see everyone soon. Mwah. Bye.